Welcome to Season 2 of Into the Forge, the Lemnos podcast, talking with hardware entrepreneurs about the journey, tools, and lessons that shape their startup and product. In this episode, I'll be talking with Andy and Cav, the founders of Fieldvision. If you're a sports coach, active in club sports, or a parent of a child who is involved with club sports, you are going to love what Fieldvision is working on. Hey guys, welcome to the studio. Why don't we start off with names and what are you doing? What's your company? What's going on?
I'm Cav. I am co-founder of Fieldvision, and we build an autonomous camera that automatically films any team sport.
And I'm Andy. I'm the other co-founder. Cav gave you the description.
You guys got last names? People are going to look you up afterwards. That's why I ask.
The full name is Kavodel Ohiomoba.
Andy Kittler.
All right. So let's get this rolling. Why did you guys start a hardware company? Like, could have done many different things. What about this idea, this company got you excited? How did you get here with this company?
My background was in sports and tech. After I graduated from college, I worked for a company that essentially built Moneyball for various NBA teams. Our first client was the Golden State Warriors. And they had this unique blend of cameras, and those cameras track the XY players of XY coordinates of every player and the XYZ of the ball. Mm-hmm. And I took that data set and built, when Stephen Curry goes left off of a ball screen, here's what he scores. Or when the Warriors run a small with Stephen Curry and Klay Thompson, here's what they do. And so that was my foray into computer vision and technology. And after that, I had this idea to just bring that down to the youth level. And so the only way to do it was hardware, and here we are.
Yeah, the inception of the idea was really Cavs, and I remember when we had been working together at a mixed panel and sat next to each other and kind of built up a rapport and mutual respect over a year or so. And we were both interested in entrepreneurship, and he actually approached me with this idea. And I was like, at first I was like, we should be mining Twitter to find highlights for pro sports games. But I had been working at various startups, and I'd also been a coach for both youth and college lacrosse. And so when he started to speak to me about like what was possible with computer vision and how we could build this camera and what we could do with it, one, I immediately knew that just from coaching, there would be a huge impact on what coaches would be able to do for teams in terms of development, but also that there would be a lot of use for the parents themselves who were fans of the teams. And so when we started peeling back the layers and doing a lot of research, it was clear that this was an implementation that required a camera, required hardware, in addition to the software.
And trust us, we explored as many ways as possible to build this without building our own hardware. And eventually we got a Raspberry Pi, sucked it up, and started going at it.
But it sounds like at that time that the idea came into fruition, there was both sort of this rational belief that there was a product that people wanted and this emotional desire to build it. Like at that junction, you were like, this was something that you felt both passion and a belief that there could be a strong business around.
Yeah, well, I think what Cav and I share is that we both have a strong passion for sports and a strong passion for the technology side of things. And so it was always a dream that for both of us, that we could build something that crossed that barrier. And when we having that background in sports, you realize like it's a lot like a religion in a lot of ways. People just completely obsess over it, and what they're obsessing over is really the content, what's coming out of the games. And we knew that if we could create compelling content and package it in a way that coaches needed it and parents needed it, that there would be something really big.
So it sounds like at the end of the day, like you knew you were going to build a company and it just had to have hardware to get where you needed to be. It's the necessary evil to get what you want for the end customer.
Certainly. And we explored various options with iPhones, with using commodity hardware to produce this for us. And it turns out building our own camera was the right move for many reasons. Mostly because it gives us end-to-end control over the content getting into the sensor and then coming out through our mobile and web apps. But just also from a data perspective, our camera sits in the same location for every single game, and we see a soccer game in the exact same way. So when you think about learning use cases and using that data to autonomously pull out highlights and pull out events and having that data all be normalized, building your own camera that sits where you control the implementation, that's a huge component of building a product, the product that we're building.
So before your company here, independent of like even commercial applications, had either of you like tinkered in building hardware, had what fans of Radio Shack as kids, were building crazy stuff, disassembled your Atari, built go-karts that went insane speeds? Like, did you have like the tinkering hardware thing, or is this really something that this is the first time through for you?
Never an official hardware product, but I bought Zigbee components and took them out to a field and try to use the Zigbee protocol to figure out locational data based on where I was. And so I tinkered with things and played around with various hardware stacks, but never fully or even thought about fully building a hardware product before this.
Yeah, I guess as a kid, I'd kind of built my own desktop and done some of those various like weekend trips to Radio Shack to buy different buttons and beepers and alarms, just building kind of random stuff. But I guess I also had some experience at a hardware software company called Theatra, which I helped start. Mm-hmm. We built a communication device for retail store associates.
Okay.
And instead of using radios at Home Depot, for example, they would use voice recognition to communicate on a one-to-one or one-to-many basis in the store, and we would track location. But I really didn't have exposure to the hardware side of that development process. And we had prototyped on Android and written a lot of software and done a lot of marketing, but hadn't got into the hardware aspect yet. And so, especially as the non-technical co-founder with Cav, like I really didn't feel like I had a ton of hardware chops either. But the hardware aspect was always kind of there in sort of the back of my mind.
Right. So, as I round out that question, with when you started a hardware company and you knew you were going to be all in and you guys knew your general backgrounds, how did that color your thinking about building out your team?
Well, I'm going to pivot that question a small bit.
Please.
Because we were software founders,
yep.
Our thoughts around the hardware were always to race to market as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
We did not want to get flushed down the hardware toilet, spend 2 to 3 years building a product and have it fail at the end, or some later period down the timeline. We wanted to get to market within the first 6 to 8 months of incorporating the company, and so that informed how we built the team, but that really informed all of the hardware decisions we made from the beginning,
right,
and moving forward from there.
Yeah, and I think we've really done our best to surround ourselves with the people who do have that deep knowledge. So we've worked really hard to build an advisory team that has a deep set of experience in cameras and hardware and manufacturing, which also includes Lemnos. and part of it was what led us here is that we knew that we really wanted to fill that founding team gap with some deep experience and have built out a bench that we feel like does that.
So you got the product in your mind. You know you're going to have to do some hardware. How did you go from that rough idea of, hey, I want to put a camera in a fixed location, I want to watch every soccer game, and I'm going to do these things with it? How did you get the refinement into what was really going to be sort of your MVP or your first product? What was that, I want to say reductive process, it might not have been reductive, but how did you go from idea to, all right, this is the thing, if we can get it out there, this is going to help us test customer reaction and bring us into market and bring us some revenue?
I think the most helpful component with that, Andy and I are in New York when we start the company, and I basically keep asking Andy to join our soccer team, and eventually he does. And so when we started building the camera, one of the forcing functions was we took it to all of the games that we played, and we'd go around and record. And so that was just it created a really quick build, test, measure, learn cycle. Mm-hmm. And because we were using it to record our games, we had this, our expectations of the product, I think, were higher than they would have been otherwise. And so that was a really awesome forcing function for us in terms of refining and taking that idea and taking and going through multiple iterations to get to a product that we thought we could put out to the market. It turns out that we pivoted after that, but
yeah, I think just from a research perspective, customer development all the way. I think in the beginning we didn't even call it customer development. We just called up anyone who wanted to take a call who was in the realm of sports, whether they be a coach or a parent or a director or in the professional level, and talk to them about what was possible with the technology and where their pain points were as a coach or as a parent. And so we did that dozens of times, and then we did it, and then we built a process around it, and then we did it hundreds of times, and we started to boil it down to a core set of things that we knew had a lot of value, and we knew were solving real pain points.
Gotcha. As you're building this out, there's obviously a whole bunch of people that you can interact with. Entrepreneurs often talk about, well, I've got great advisors, right? And they're always thinking about advisors. But talk to me about like mentors and peers and people inside the building. How did they help you go through this process? How much do you rely on them? And how would you describe your relationship with, outside of your own team, how do you bring in more knowledge?
We have a set of advisors that we essentially go on a roadshow every month or two, and give them the pitch and tell them the story and give them the update around where we currently are. And for us, that's been an incredible way to test our theses and to validate our thinking and to incorporate feedback. That's just been a really important part of our process in terms of seeking those folks out. I mean, we found folks who like sports, were interested in the product natively. And so I think that was a pretty simple process for us to find folks who were just really passionate and really, willing to give us their equity, their sweat equity. And our most key advisor is the Dean of Engineering at WashU, and he has a machine learning background. He started, 3 or 4 computer vision companies. And I took his computer vision class on Udacity and reached out to him through that medium. And he used to work for the New England Patriots, and he actually worked on a computer vision product for sports analytics for the New England Patriots. And so he just had this natural affinity to the idea and has been more than willing to give us his time. And I think for us, we really keep these folks updated and just make sure they're part of the story, an ongoing part of the story, and that keeps them engaged.
Yeah, I guess I'll also say that you get a different type of feedback from a peer or a fellow entrepreneur that's around you than you do from an advisor. And it's been fantastic to be around so many of those people in Lemnos that are working in sort of similar problem spaces. I don't want to say it's more unfiltered, but it's a different perspective. It's a little closer to the ground, and so we've gotten a lot of value from just our peers talking about their experience, relating to their experience, and filtering that into our own story.
Gotcha. You're going along this process. What tools have you found, just to this point in time? Obviously, tools change as time goes along, but tools, whether they be software, hardware, processes, what are some of the things that you've adopted that have made this, challenging voyage easier? Like, what have you found along the way that's making your job as founders and as team members easier?
I guess I'll start. I think we've always been big believers in sort of managing the data that we're collecting. And so be that customer development data or, data from optics experiments that we're running, we try and keep a really structured way of attaching that to learnings. And we do that through tools like Asana, et cetera. But I think that the other where that also comes in is, we always knew about product requirements documents and these other types of things before we got to Lemnos, but having a specific template that we could work off and a set of documents that adhere to a template with an MRD, a PRD, and these other different these other docs that we would run through on an iterative basis and continue to update really helped synthesize all that feedback that we were housing in this, our giant project management tool.
Everything Andy said, plus one additional thing. So for us, as we built and worked on our hardware, logging was an incredibly important piece of debugging in a way that isn't quite the case in software. And so having a logging infrastructure that's set up for your product and set up for your needs was just hugely crucial in terms of saving us time and just narrowing down the search space for all the problems that we ran into.
So when you're talking about logging, are you talking about like hardware telemetry or, can you what's in your log?
So it's almost everything. It's like it's hardware telemetry. What are we encoding? All that stuff. It's also what field do they play at? What are the conditions outside? And because we have a unit that's outside, that's exposed to the conditions, wind, sun, things like that. We'd have issues where our cameras, our PLA on our unit would melt a little bit, which would cause our cameras to be offset a little bit, which changed the image a little bit. And so just having information around, okay, how hot was it during that day? and using that information to make decisions about how we build the product moving forward. That was hugely impactful for us.
I think that's a little tidbit for the audiences out there. Like, again, it's really, when you go to market really fast, sometimes you use rapid prototyping tools, you'll 3D print something, you use a PLA or something. Yeah, it's like the real world in PLA, they have a unique interaction, and you got to play. And it's not that you did it, it's totally, you want to get out there fast, but you've got to capture that maybe something happened because that rapid prototyping tool had its own unique sort of boundary conditions in terms of, like in this case, weather. That won't be it will not be in the final product, but definitely something. So logging would catch stuff like that, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Just on that note, I hadn't even thought of it, but we see like one of our core strengths that we've been able to get out into the field a few times now on different rounds of product iterations.
Yep.
And that wouldn't be possible without the rapid prototyping tools you're talking about, getting a 3D print around components that we buy off the shelf, put together, and actually build software for, and doing that a few times over before we feel like we're ready to design for manufacturing. So
it's one of the things that we loved at Lemnos is, as we talked to you guys initially, is that you had already been in field and were getting real feedback, and that loop is, that is the essence of the business, right? You and your customer. Everything else is secondary to that. So, any teams that can get there faster, boy, it's, I'm sure you'd probably attest to it. It's the only way to understand what the customer really wants is just to interact with them a bunch. So, what's been the most surprising thing about this process? Like, and I know you're not done. In fact, you'll never, hate to tell you, you'll never be done. But it's just a constant process. But up until this point, what's the thing that sort of caught you off guard, surprised you? You're like, whoa, I just was not expecting that in the life cycle of the company so far.
That's a difficult question because I think there's always going to be a lot of surprises, and things like technical surprises are just part of the game. I think anyone who's ever developed a product before realizes that things come up in the course of development that you didn't expect, that expand the scope. I think learning about what types of things come up from a hardware perspective was new for Cav and I. We kind of understood what a software development roadmap and timeline looks like, but you run into an entirely different set of constraints and set of parameters when you're dealing with hardware. And so that was a big learning experience for us.
Yeah, I think the most surprising thing is how much is involved with bringing a hardware product to market. And that may sound a little naive, but the amount of information you have to process and capture and keep in mind and keep organized, especially as you're building a team out and you're distributing units and you're thinking about inventory and all of these things that I hadn't thought about before. Those are the most surprising things, I think, during this journey for Meatless.
Yeah, I think all entrepreneurs are optimists to a certain degree, and they tend to want to say, yeah, we can do this, and we can do this in X amount of months. And when you're dealing with a new field, which was hardware for us, there was a learning curve in realizing that the timelines were going to be extended because of the nature of hardware development. Those were big learnings.
I'd say the last thing is looking back and investigating the mistakes that you've made in the past and thinking about how you could have possibly made those mistakes. That's been surprising in terms of, you look back at Andy or Cav 3 weeks ago and you're just really surprised that this is the decision they ended up making. And so, and that never stops happening. So that's, yeah.
So someone in the audience who's listening to this is sitting at the precipice. They've already become an entrepreneur, probably going to work on hardware, maybe not. But what advice, given your journey to date, would you give them as they get ready to start their journey?
I would say one of the most critical things for us is organization around information. And it's such a simple thing, it seems like such a simple thing, but just having really good organization around information, whether that's in Asana, whether that's on Google Drive, whether that's a process where you're finding a product design partner, an ID partner, and being able to take that information and transmit it to, from me to Andy or from me to the team, streamlining that communication. It's just such an important part. It saves you so much time and energy. that would have been something that I would have wanted to hear. Just have really, really precise organization around, especially the critical information that you're gathering over time.
Did you see that? Like, because this isn't in essence your first startup, right? You've been at others. Did you see that and want to emulate it? Did you see it or see a lack of it in before and you wanted to amplify it? How did you come to that realization?
Well, yeah, during our time at Mixpanel, my time at Mixpanel, you look at communication and it seems like the hardest problem to solve. Like really communication between 2 and then 3 and then N people. It gets harder and harder over time. And the teams in which I saw it, in which it was the best at Mixpanel, were the teams that were really diligent about keeping that information organized and also just having streamlined channels of communication between folks. And so that's something I took away from Mixpanel and wanted to implement here. I think the one thing that's different here is that we have this diversity of information because we're all working on such different things. Mm-hmm. And so it's a lot harder to organize that as it relates to what I saw at our previous company.
Yeah, I guess the one piece of advice I would give is seek feedback, especially critical feedback. We've spent a lot of time going out and trying to cultivate advisors and cultivate people who knew more about the topics that we were working on than we did, and get the feedback on it. And that feedback is totally invaluable to the growth process. And I think the more that you can open yourself to critical feedback on your product, on your idea, on your pitch, on your process, on your team, then the better off you'll be for it. And I think that's the single thing that if we continue to do well, then we're going to be fine.
So you guys chose to work with Lemnos. I'd love to ask the question at both the specific and the generic level, which is, why did you choose to work with Lemnos? And if you could pull the camera back a little bit, you made a decision to get some partners or, work with somebody. How did you go through that process and why did you make that selection in the end?
So I think Cav and I alluded to the fact earlier that we weren't hardware founders and we wanted to fill this gap as to how to have essentially a core partner to develop a hardware product with. And when we started interacting with Lemnos, we saw the potential for a great core partner there. And as the conversation developed, it became really apparent that these are exactly the type of people we wanted to work with, that we could develop a great working relationship with them and depend on them to add value from a hardware perspective to our business.
Specifically, and this is something, a granular thought or a granular piece of the experience I remember from the conversations we had with Lemnos, the feedback was critical and candid, and that it didn't seem like that would change. And I think during the initial courting process or engagement of yourself and any partner, usually that's the rosiest part, and then sort of goes from there as it goes. And I think we left our conversations with Lemnos feeling like this is how it was going to be. And you could see sort of our trajectory change given that rate of feedback, given your hardware expertise, or the hardware expertise that you folks had here. The other thing that was awesome, and I think is a little understated from the Lemnos side, is the talent that you have here and the other companies, and how that just, the community reinforces itself, and it's such a huge value add. And I talked to a couple of folks over here, and it was apparent that we would be in a place with a ton of smart founders and smart people, and that's the kind of place you always want to be. Yeah,
I think shortly after we started, there was a quarterly founders meeting, which I had missed, but I just remember Cav coming back and be like, "Oh my God, you guys, you wouldn't believe how many smart people are in a room, and how much respect they have for Lemnos and Eric and the whole team here, and how many great ideas are being worked on." So that was something that we kind of knew, but once we actually arrived, it was a whole new ballgame.
Yeah, and I bring this up because I think regardless of where you're going to start and whether it's, what geography or what area, surrounding yourself with people as smart as you can, that's one of the big keys to success, because hardware's not something you can, buy a book and know what to do. Not that you can 100% in software, but hardware's, 10 different disciplines in the first 15 hires to pull off what you're doing. So the community is always a great thing. So my last question, I always love asking this question because you're already working 25 hours a day on your project, but I find that some entrepreneurs they break away to watch TV just to get away. I don't know how they can watch Black Mirror and get away from the technology world, but they do. They read books. They've got favorite bands. They got a gadget that their Nintendo Switch is their lifesaver. For you guys, when you're not in the zone in that 26th hour, how do you get away from being the hardware entrepreneur? How do you get away and get some self-centered time? How do you approach that as a founder?
Reading is therapeutic for me, but the thing that is most therapeutic is either playing sports or shooting a basketball.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll put on headphones and go to the gym at 7:30 in the morning and just shoot for an hour and a half, and all of your problems just ooze out until you come into work.
Yeah, Cap said reading, so I think there's a lot of things I like to do. Just relaxing, hanging out with my wife, getting outside is probably the most important. But my favorite gadget is definitely my mountain bike. It's not only a pretty incredible piece of hardware with the suspension they have working on those things, but it's kind of like what Cap said about shooting. Like riding a single track trail in the Bay Area is just a therapeutic experience, and it's one of my favorite activities. So,
did you guys bake it in to the ethos of your company, like this balance? How important? I know it's like we all have to just work our beeps off, but finding that balance for you guys personally, and did you feel like that was important to inject into the company? And how do you do that, but keep it in balance, but make sure that time away is, if it's so therapeutic? How did you think about that?
Yeah, we definitely. So one of the things we do, one of our 3 o'clock habits, we grab a soccer ball and we go outside and we juggle. And the current juggle record is 182 for the team.
I've watched it, but I didn't know what the number was. 182. That's pretty damn good.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. And that I think for the team, it serves the same purpose as mountain biking does for Andy or shooting does for me. It just gives you a chance to step back and reflect and focus on a single thing that has nothing to do with what you're working on. And so that's something we wanted to bake into the culture, and that's a way we've baked into the culture. And we're always looking to expand on that.
I'd say in the beginning, none of us were particularly good jugglers or soccer players, even for that matter, but it's one of those things that's so accessible, and like everybody loves to just get outside and hang out and decompress for 20 minutes or 30 minutes, and like we have this shared team goal around the record, capped at 182. It's been standing for a while, but we always got in to break it. So definitely, it's been an important part of just our daily routines.
Well, if folks wanted to find out more about your company, where do you want to send them on the web?
So our marketing site or website is at fieldvision.co. We're always hiring. So angel.co/fieldvision, and then twitter.com/fieldvisionhq is our Twitter handle.
Or just shoot us an email anytime if you're interested. Andy at fieldvision.co and Kavodel at fieldvision.co.
Yeah. Or K at fieldvision.co.
Guys, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Cheers.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Into the Forge. If you have questions or comments, feel free to reach out to me via the email address podcast@lemnos.vc. That's LEMNOS.VC. For our next episode, I'm excited to interview the founders of Sarah Forge, who are using the fusion of 100-year-old weaving and sewing technologies, plus state-of-the-art software and hardware, to radically cut the cost and improve the quality of parts made with carbon fiber. And for older episodes, please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or listen to episodes on the Lemnos VC website.